Thank you all for coming. I was asked after last Vaad to address the marriage relationship, so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, before we start, it's important to understand what marriage is. So we have to begin with a brief definition. Marriage is a relationship between two people where one of the people is always right and the other one is the husband. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I want to say that I have been telling that joke, Mila de Bechusa, well before I came here, so it shouldn't cast any aspersions on any of the couples that I'm working with here in Lakewood. Now, the thing that is important to know, every married person needs to know, is that you cannot live with another human being without sometimes offending them, irritating them, frustrating or annoying them. That's true even for a roommate, alachas kama v'kama, a spouse. Now, if inevitably you're going to be irritating, annoying, or chalila even hurting your spouse, the balm that can heal those wounds, those minor nicks and bruises, cuts and bruises, consists of compliments, approval, and praise. And it's very, very important in any marriage that you have to be able to be complimenting and praising your spouse quite often. Now, how often do you have to do that? So with the couples with whom I work, I very often need to address this point, and the way I like to illustrate it is with a mushal. We're all familiar with how a bank account works. Let's say a checking account, for example. You make deposits and withdrawals. And maybe we're more familiar with the withdrawals, not so familiar with the deposits. But you know you could make as many withdrawals as you want. You could write as many checks as you want. There's no limit to the number of checks you can write, as long as you have deposits that cover the checks. Once you write a check for $1 above the amount you have in the account, that shuts down the account and incurs usually a hefty bank fee for the bounced check. A relationship works the same way. The nimshal is that the withdrawals are the criticisms, the complaints, the irritation, the frustration, the annoyance, the disappointment, and the hurt feelings. Those are withdrawals. The deposits are the praise and the compliments and the approval. Now, if you want to make sure that your bank account doesn't close, Khalila, and isn't shut down, then you have to make very certain that you've made more deposits in that account than withdrawals. Now, in a private conversation that I was zeichet to have with the Novominsker Rebbe Shlita, Yaakov Perlo, he asked a very good question. In Parshas Kisavo, we know in the beginning talks about the mitzvah of Bikurim. And then, after the Jewish farmer has brought the Bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash, Pasuk says, "V'anisa v'amarta l'fnei Hashem Elokecha, arami oved avi v'yered Mitzrayima v'yager sham b'misei ma'at v'yisham l'goy gadol atzum v'rov." So there's a whole declaration that has to be said, called the Mikra Bikurim, and that really represents the backbone of the Pesach Haggadah. We darshan it on Pesach, Leil Pesach. So the Novominsker Rebbe asked, what's the purpose of the mitzvah Bikurim? Is to show hakaras hatov to the Kadosh Baruch Hu for giving us Eretz Yisrael. A Yid is supposed to demonstrate his hakaras hatov. It's not a simple thing, Bikurim. Not only do you have to take the first fruits that are most dear to you after all your hard work in the field to raise those fruits and give it to the Kohen, the Beis Hamikdash, you have to cut it off the tree, put it in a nice basket, and schlep all the way to Yerushalayim. Not everyone lived in Yerushalayim. Maybe it took a few days, maybe it took a few weeks to get there. And you had to make this whole trip just to bring the fruits to Yerushalayim. So I asked the Novominsker Rebbe, doesn't that demonstrate Hakaras HaTov? All the tircha and Mesiras Nefesh, doesn't that demonstrate Hakaras HaTov? Why is it necessary to also recite the Mikra Bikurim? You've demonstrated Hakaras HaTov. So the Novominsker Rebbe answered his own question. He said to me, the Torah is teaching us a very important lesson, that when it comes to Hakaras HaTov, demonstrations are very important, but they're not sufficient. It's not enough just to demonstrate your appreciation. You have to open your mouth and you have to practice saying it. Words of appreciation are very, very important, and that's why the Torah went out of its way to stress the Mikra Bikurim, the long Mikra Bikurim that the Jewish farmer has to recite when he brings the Bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash. Now, when it comes to expressing Hakaras HaTov to a spouse, to expressing compliments, appreciation, and so on, it's very, very important in all marriages, and with the couples with whom I work, usually they're in my office not because they have a lot of nice things to say to each other. They're in my office because they have a lot of complaints, and that's why they're there. There's criticism, they're upset, they're hurt. They may even be angry with each other. One or both of them are angry with each other. And they came to complain. And that's understandable. That's why they're there. However, it's important not to give the wrong impression that everything is all black and there's no white. So when couples come to see me, I insist that even before they begin any complaint, if it's their turn to speak, they have to begin with something positive. It's important to train a person right away from the beginning to know that even if you have to complain, you can preface it with some compliment, some praise. So I remember one couple I was working with, that actually I wrote about it recently in my column in the Shopper, but I want to repeat it again now because it's nogeya to our subject. When it came time for the husband to speak, he started to launch into his complaints. Like, just a minute. You remember the rules here. You have to say something positive. Well, I can't think of anything positive. He said to me. You can't think of anything positive to say to your wife? No, I'm so upset, I'm so angry. I understand you're upset and angry. And we'll get to that. But something you have to be able to say positive. We can't go any further until you say something nice to your wife. And then we'll go further. Just something, anything. He's thinking and thinking, grumbling, mumbling under his breath. And finally says, well, the chillin was good this week. Okay. He complimented his wife's cooking, fine. Okay. Then he launched into his complaint. The next time it was his turn to speak, again he started to complain. I said, wait a minute, don't you remember the rules? You have to say something positive. Okay, the chillin was good this week. I said, well, wait a minute. That's what you said last time. He said, well, it was good again this week. I said, but that's all it was good? Now, take a look at his wide girth. It was obvious to me that he wasn't only enjoying his wife's chillin. He obviously enjoyed other things that she prepared because he wouldn't have had that size girth if not for her good cooking. I said, there must be something else that you appreciate. So he was thinking and thinking. He said, well, I can't think of anything now. I said, well, think for a minute. There must be something else. And he complimented her on maybe it was a soup that she made Friday night. I don't remember exactly the details. It was difficult for him. He could go into great detail about his complaints, but when it came to appreciation, it was very parv, so to speak, and very limited. When you're giving a compliment, it's important to go into detail. It's not just enough to say the chillin was good this week and now launch into a whole tirade of complaints. If you're offering a compliment, you have to go into as much detail as you do about a complaint. So another example I like to give is when a person is buying an esrog. He doesn't just go in the store and say, well, it looks like an esrog, I'll buy it. Like you do with a lemon. You're shopping for a lemon, you pick it up and make sure it's not an orange. It's not an orange, it's not a peach, it's a lemon. Okay, fine. We can make lemonade. An esrog, you don't do that. An esrog, you pick it up, you hold it against the light, you examine it closely, you turn it slowly, you're looking for every little detail. Well, if you're looking for every little detail to decide whether an esrog is kosher, you have to look at every little detail when you're trying to offer a compliment. Now, what does that mean, halacha l'maisa, in practical terms? You can say what you like. The cholent was good. What did you like about the cholent? What did you like? Was that the only thing you liked about the cholent? Was the only thing that your wife did that you appreciate? The only item that you enjoyed eating? And that's the only thing you can praise her for? People need to be able to express appreciation. You need to be able to express compliments more freely and in more detail in order to offset some of the criticism and hurt feelings that are very inevitable and that can come in any marriage. Now, in order to illustrate the importance of this, I'd like to share a Hasidic Maisa, one of my favorites. The story is told of Reb Hershel Koneker, who used to travel around, as Hasidic Rebbes used to do. And the first thing he did whenever he came into a new town was to ask where the mikveh was. He was very makpid on the mikveh. The story is told that he came into one particular town, he asked where the mikveh was. They said, there's no mikveh in town. He said, what? A Yiddish taught on a mikveh? How could that be? A Jewish community and you don't have a mikveh? It's impossible. He said, well, we can't afford to build one. We can't afford to build one. Every town has a gvir, so the gvir will sponsor it. They said, Rebbe, you don't understand. We have a gvir in town, but he's very, very karg, and you can't get any money out of him no matter what. We've tried, can't. Listen, if the Rebbe could get any money out of him to build a mikveh, we would be forever indebted to the Rebbe. See what you could do? Okay. So the Rebbe paid a visit to the gvir in town, knocked on the door, was invited in. The gvir took one look at the Rebbe and said, listen, Rebbe, if you're here to ask me for tzedakah, I want you to know that's not my mitzvah. That's not my mitzvah. I don't give tzedakah. Other mitzvahs I do, but that's not my mitzvah. So Reb Hershel said to the gvir, that's not why I came. So, oh really? Then why did you come? He said, I came to see if there's anything I could do for you. Maybe you'd like a bracha. Rebbes give brachas. I came to offer you a bracha. Is there anything you need? Man is thinking. He says, well, actually, Rebbe, there is something I need. Maybe you could give me a bracha. I'd like my wife to drop dead. Chas v'shalom. What are you talking about? I give brachas for a lot of things. I've never been asked to give a bracha for something like that. Why would you want me to give you such a bracha? He says, Rebbe, I have a lot of money. I have a big house. You see, I have a beautiful house. I can't enjoy it. My wife eats my heart out. Every night I come home, we're fighting and yelling. It's terrible. The neighbors are probably having a good laugh at our expense because we're fighting all day long like cats and dogs. I'm such agmas nefesh. The only eitzah, Rebbe, if you could give me a bracha, that maybe my wife should pass away, that's all I could think of. Rebbe said, listen, I'm a Hasidic Rebbe, I'm asked for many different kinds of brachas. I've never been asked for a bracha for that. I can't give such a bracha. If you want, I can give you an eitzah. Okay, I'll take the eitzah. Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, Amud Beis, it says, Rabbi Nassan Omer, Ba'ovan nedarim meisa isha shel adam. Person makes a neder and he doesn't keep it, that could cause his wife to have a shortened lifespan. That's my eitzah to you. The Gvir says, a terrific idea. Shabbos, he goes over to the Gabbai, I want an aliyah. I want to make a mishaberach. Okay. Gets an aliyah, It's a mishaberach, ba'avur she, I'm donating a new mikveh to the town. Ooh, the Gvir is giving a new mikveh, they're all excited, terrific. Motzei Shabbos, the Gaboyim run over to the Gvir's house. Let's draw up the plans, let's get started with the architect, let's get building on it. It's a terrific project, we're so excited we're getting a mikveh. The Gvir says, nothing doing. I made a nether, I don't plan to keep it. Forget about it, I don't give tzedakah, I'm not paying a penny. You can go home. Okay. So the Gvir, the Gaboyim were very disappointed, obviously. And Reb Heschel left, went back home. And a week later, the Gvir shows up at Reb Heschel's house, knocks on the door. Heschel comes in the middle of the night. What is it? What is it? What's the emergency? The Gvir comes to the door. Rebbe, don't you remember you were in my town last week? He says, yes, of course I remember. You came to my house? Yes, I remember. Well, what's the emergency? Do you remember what I asked you? Yes, I remember. It was very unusual, but I remember it. You gave me an eitzah. I said, yes, I remember. So what's the problem? He said, well, I followed your eitzah, and it didn't help. My wife is still alive and kicking and more nasty than ever. Really? It's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. So let me ask you something. He says, whenever you fight with your wife, are the windows open in your home? He said, of course. We need a little air. It gets hot sometimes. We have to open the windows. He said, do the neighbors ever hear? Well, of course, the neighbors always hear us shouting. They probably have a good laugh at our expense. He said, that could be the problem. He said, what do you mean, Rebbe? I don't understand. Well, if you're yelling at your wife and the neighbors hear it, maybe your wife gets embarrassed. He said, well, she does. I get embarrassed also. We're both embarrassed. So you don't understand. If someone is embarrassed by another person, it's considered like a ritzicha. And maybe in Shemayim there's a gezerah against her, but because you embarrass her barabim, and it's like you're killing her, so that takes off the gezerah. It's as if she died. He said, Rebbe, what should I do? He said, I gave you an eitzah. I give you another eitzah. Maybe every time your wife criticizes you, attacks you, or screams at you, or yells at you, you say something nice to her. I'm sure it'll be difficult, but try to be misgaber on yourself. Say something nice to her, and this way, she won't be embarrassed by you yelling at her. And then the original gezerah from you not fulfilling the neder will kick in, and maybe you'll have hatzlacha that way. Oh, thank you, Rebbe. What a terrific idea. Goes back home. A week later, middle of the night, Reb Heschel's woken up. What is it? Who's there? Comes to the door. Sure enough, it's the Gvir. So what's the problem now? Rebbe, don't you remember last week I came? Yes, I remember. And you gave me an eitzah? Yes, I remember. But what are you waking me up in the middle of the night for? You told me every time my wife starts yelling at me, I should say something nice to her. I should compliment her. Well, I followed your advice. He says, so what's the problem? Well, she stopped yelling at me. She stopped criticizing me. And she really became very pleasant to live with. So Heschel says, so what's the problem? Why are you waking me up in the middle of the night for? He says, because she suddenly took sick. And I called the doctor. And he says he doesn't think there's any hope for her. And Rebbe, I need a bracha that she should live. I don't want her to die now. We're having such a good relationship recently. I can't believe it. I wouldn't want anything to happen to her. Then Heschel turned to the Gvir. He says, well, then you may just have to build that mikveh after all. And that's a Hasidic Shemaisa. You can take it at face value. There's certainly a lesson that can be learned. The lesson, obviously, doesn't need to be stated, but we'll state it anyway. That it's so important to be able to express words of appreciation and compliments to a spouse that even if the relationship is not the way you'd like it to be, sometimes the compliments and the appreciation itself can turn things around. Now, again, I gave an illustration with a Hasidic Shemaisa. But I had an unbelievable hashgacha pratis this week that I met somebody who told me something that was so mat'im for this Vaad that I was blown away by the hashgacha pratis of having met this person. There's a very well-known prominent mechanech in Brooklyn, not in Lakewood, who approached me a few years ago. I know him socially, not professionally. And he confided in me that his wife was suffering from a severe chronic depression. For years, she couldn't function as a wife, she couldn't function as a mother. She was just so severely depressed, she couldn't function practically at all. He was beside himself because he didn't have a wife and he didn't have a mother for his children. They went through the gamut of different options. They tried every therapy, didn't work. They tried medications, antidepressants, the full line of different medications, nothing seemed to work. And he turned to me and asked, is there anything that I could recommend? They've tried everything. So I asked him, he reviewed with me the medications that his wife had tried, the different therapies she went to, the therapist they consulted. I said, you went to the top. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did. I just give you a bracha, she should have a refuah shleima. So I happened to see him this week, and I heard of a new program that's available in Brooklyn. I believe it's here in Lakewood as well. It's called NeuroCare. It's a new treatment that's non-invasive. It's very effective. There's some good results for chronic depression that is unresponsive to therapy and medication. There's a new form of treatment that's available now. And I heard about it. It's a good results, good research on it. And I happened to meet this mechanech this week, and I thought I would suggest it to him. So I came over to him, I said, you know, we haven't spoken in a while, and remember you had told me the situation with your wife. I had a suggestion, how's your wife doing? He said, oh, Baruch Hashem, she's much, much better. I said, really? Yes. But you told me she was chronically depressed. Yes, she was, but Baruch Hashem, she's completely better. I said, wow, that's fantastic. I'm so happy to hear it. Please tell me, what was the treatment? And he answered, B'ezras Hashem, I was the treatment. You were the treatment. Please explain. So he told me, he confided in me, that about 2 years ago, he did some very, very serious soul searching. And he realized that he hadn't really been treating his wife as a Ben Torah should. And he started treating her differently, being nicer to her, offering her words of appreciation and compliments. And lo and behold, the depression that was unresponsive to heavy medication, psychotherapy, combination of the two that couldn't help, lifted her depression. And she's functioning normally as a wife and as a mother. And he gave me one illustration just to drive the point home graphically. He said when she was depressed and he would speak, he's called upon to speak publicly very often, she would disparage the speaking. What do you have to speak for? And she would knock it and knock him for the speaking, and he felt very uncomfortable. After all, that's part of his career, his tachlis, being mechanech. He said this past Shabbos he was invited to give a shiur somewhere in the neighborhood. His wife said, let me walk you to the shiur. After the shiur, she said, how was the shiur? How many people came? How did it go? She took such an interest. He said they've never been closer since they're married. He realizes that he made some mistakes and he tried to correct them. And he said to me he felt I should publicize his example if I could. And I said there happens to be a very close opportunity. I'm going to be speaking on this in a couple of days, and I think it would be very appropriate to share this example. He took the lesson from the story of Reb Hershel Kanaka very seriously. I don't know if he knows the Maisa or not, but he certainly took the lesson very seriously. The point, Rabbosai, is that it's extremely important to always offer words of praise and appreciation and compliments to a spouse. It can sometimes, even in extreme cases, turn around a negative, conflicted, hostile relationship into a positive one. And if you don't accept the Hasidic Maaseh that I told you as a proof, then accept the story of the Mechanech who told me just this week how it changed his marriage and turned it around 180 degrees. So it's a lesson really for all of us to take home and to take to heart. I just want to announce that the next Vaad will be in Elul. We'll be skipping next month because it's Bein Hazmanim. So we'll be meeting in Elul. It's, I think, the second Sunday in September. I think it's the 11th. If I got it straight, if I didn't get it right, it should be the second Sunday in September. There'll be announcements, of course, going out as usual. And if anybody who's watching on the video would like to subscribe, they can click just below on the side, on this side, okay, and they can subscribe. And also, if anybody wants to give any feedback or suggestions for future topics to the video, they can email the Vaad at chinuchvaad123@gmail.com, and our very capable coordinator, Ritza Gross, will forward the emails to me. So I wish you a gesunden Zimmer, and I hope to see you back at the next Vaad in Elul. B'ezras Hashem.